Hey, so gonna do a quick overview for Spellblade Mythic. Due to recent changes, it's most likely gonna be our fourth boss that we're gonna go for. If obviously things change on the fight, if it's still too difficult, then plans may change. But for now, it's gonna be Spellblade. Now, there's a ton of different ways to do this fight, but it's more or less the same. You stand differently, marks are placed differently. But the Mythic limit video that I've got here is the way personally I think could be a lot better because the tanks and the melee get a lot more space. But it's like I said, every video you're going to see is more or less the same, but it's done in reverse. So the video you're going to see is with the range stood at the stairs, and on most kill videos, like even Fat Boss, they've got the tank on the stairs. It's the same tactic really, but the way we're going to do it, the tanks and the melee are going to have more space and they're not all cramped in a small corner. So really what we're going to have is the skull mark they're using. We're going to have all the ranging healers stood there, and the boss will be dragged over to the fountain shortly. I think they usually just burst him down there, but the boss will be moved over to around Moon and tanked there. We'll have ranging healers in the middle. They're doing it a bit differently, obviously, because it's their limit and they probably one-shot this boss. And we will split our ranging healers into two groups of 4 players in each group, and they will soak Mark of Frost on both sides. So the first Mark of Frost will go to the left, and they break on 10 stacks. It's a simple 10 stacks go together, 10 stacks go together. The right side, this is where we're going to use a little bit of what the Fat Boss are talking about. So the right side, when you get your marks, you're going to shatter your marks at 4 stacks. This basically lines up so when you get the adds and the detonate, you're not overlapping with 10 stacks, and it just makes things a lot easier. You're not taking extra damage. So we carry this on, and when we detonate our marks, we're going to detonate them in the middle and not on the right. So we're going to detonate them more or less near the melee, so the tanks can pick them up, and that's it. We gather them up, nuke them in melee, and it's straight back to your groups. With the way Mythic works, we're going to have Frost overlapping into the fire phase, so it's going to be a lot of damage. This fight, though, in terms of healing, it's more single target demand rather than heavy raid-wide AoE, especially for the Frost and the beginning of the fire phase. So I'm going to pause it and just skip up to the fire. So for the animations, it's just the same as Heroic. We want to keep them spread, but in Mythic, it's just a lot more dangerous. Even if they're spread, the casts are going to do a ridiculous amount of damage, so we've got to make sure we get interrupts going. Now, one of the strategies going right now is DBM marks, and then we set a melee or a range to each ad. We're going to see how it goes, because it's going to take a shit ton of coordination, but I will have a go at doing that if it gets too much. But it's just like Heroic, spread them out, kill them. It's going to be where we use the majority of our raid CDs. And for the arcane phase, this is going to be the easiest part of the fight, but one of the most healing demanding parts of the fight as well. So we're going to pause it, and we're going to use the exact marks we're going to use for the range. So we've got 2 marks on both sides of the camp. So obviously skull was where we all stand. Then we've got orange, and I think they're using star for the frost phase. And I don't know what marks we're going to use, but for the purpose of this video, we're all going to go more or less to the orange mark. You can't do it in a video because obviously we've got an orb there. But we're all going to gather close to that mark once the orbs have gone out and you've detonated. We gather, and at this point, I haven't talked about the ad yet, but this is where the ad becomes a bit important. So the ad is going to do a frontal cone, and try and imagine it like Majordomo Star Cone from the Firelands, where in the Scorpion phase the damage is split. That's the one thing that comes to my mind, and that's what this ad does. Basically in this phase, it does a swipe, and it does a frontal cone which is split between all players hit. So the tanks can solo that if they want to, but it's a chunk of damage, and it's just easier if it's faced into the raid. So all we'll do is we'll stand there, and it's very important that usually people will stand behind, and you can't in this. You've got to stand in front of the tanks, but obviously you don't want to run too far to the point where we're spawning orbs ahead of each other. So we need to just keep on our toes and not get ahead of ourselves. So we run with the tanks, keep stagger stepping. You don't want to go too far. The orb explosions themselves don't deal that much damage, to be honest. It's just a swipe, so it's not going to be that much intensive. The swipe itself will do a lot of damage, but the orbs won't. So then we gather. After all the orbs have landed, you will get 2 more swipes, so make sure you still stay stacked, don't go running off. And then all the ads animate, and because they're in a straight line, they can all be AoE'd. I mean, in Heroic, our Heroic kills are quite messy, but our ads are always like pretty clumped up. But in Mythic, it's very important. So the ads get AoE'd because they're all gathered, and our AoE is actually quite good because we've got Warriors and a Death Knight, and pretty good AoE classes. So they get destroyed. And then it's rinse and repeat the tanks, pull the boss back over to the start. And what we'll do there is we'll gather in the middle again, and then we'll split into our groups as they come out. And that's the fight. We blow Lust on the pull, and we will go with 5 healers for the start. Because of the HP nerf and the Frost nerf, maybe 4 is more suitable for us, but it's a 1-2 punch. There's a HP nerf and a damage nerf. So we're not really going to see an enrage if people stay alive, so a 5th healer is good for extra pad damage, extra pad healing when we need it. I'm going to quickly go over the Fel ad. So in phase 1, the Frost phase, 1 tank is going to take the Annihilates, or most of the Annihilates, and 1 tank will take the ad. In the Frost phase, the ad is basically just going to melee the tanks, and every so often she will target a random range member and do a Blade Storm which knocks players back. It does a significant amount of damage, so you don't want to keep her close by. Now you can't really see a point of view in this video, but I will link one below with a timestamp so you can see exactly what you're looking for. But more or less all you're doing is taunting the Fel Assault ad, taking her far away. Obviously with our strat we're going to have to kill a majority of the trash in the room, but that won't take long. Drag her far away and there won't really be a problem. In the fire phase, she will jump, and I can actually show that. She will jump on a random range member again and leave Fel patches, which don't really do that much damage, but you can't stand in them. The main issue is that because you've still got Marks of Frost going out at the same time, it gets quite annoying, so you just got to be able to adapt and adjust your positioning. So the main problem here is going to be a leap going out, and then we end up having players break Mark of Frost early, which can be quite problematic. So it might take a few pulls just to get ready to adjust that on the fly. But more or less, if you can master each phase once, then it's just a case of doing it again. I did mention earlier with the HP nerf, I mean our damage isn't bad, so we're not really going to see the enrage with the HP nerf. I think she's got about 2.9 billion on Mythic now. She'd have 3.4. So it's a significant drop. So I'll write everything below, and I'll leave an angry assignment maybe tomorrow once we actually get an idea of what sort of groups we've got. And of course, if you've got any questions, just post them below or message myself or one of the officers in game.